Welcome to WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast from Pharma Voice. This episode was made possible by a generous sponsorship from Sendoit, an IQVIA company. For more information, visit sendoit.com. In this episode, Taryn Grome, Editor-in-Chief of Pharma Voice, meets with Jill Quigley, Chief Operating Officer, Passage Bio.
Jill, welcome to the WOW program.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
We're delighted to dig into your story here today. You have worn a lot of hats during your pharmaceutical career, ranging from general counsel to CEO to chief operating officer, which is your current title now at Passage Bio. Tell me about your journey and how have all of these experiences led to you where you are now?
Yeah. I mean, Taryn, I haven't had a traditional career trajectory for a business leader, but the path I've taken really, yeah, I don't know, but the path really speaks to my deep curiosity. And that curiosity has allowed me to take on some very big challenges without feeling overwhelmed. Whether that was, being an integral member of the deal team for the $11 billion acquisition by Pharmaset, or taking on that acting CEO role at Nutrinia. The just say yes and figure it out approach has been one of the most important factors in developing my career. You don't need to have direct experience or have a set plan to say yes. You can just say yes and then develop a plan, and that'll get you to a solution or a recommendation. I did start my career at a law firm. I was providing legal advice to life science clients, and it was during that time that I began to establish a very strong network of contacts. My network's really grown over the years, and it has benefited me throughout my career. Every role I've taken since being at the law firm has come through my network. And when I did make that move in-house from the law firm, it was really fascinating and eye-opening to me because I became aware of this tremendous range of career paths and possibilities outside of just being a partner or general counsel. And so I took a lot of opportunities to build a strong foundation of corporate knowledge by, again, saying yes to, whatever was put in front of me, even if it was far outside my comfort zone. An example of that was, when I was at NPS, I wound up co-leading the international expansion there. And that was certainly a new project for me. And I think just overall, I'd say, again, that continual curiosity, willingness to take on new challenges, and a strong commitment to relationships have been quite influential in shaping my career.
I'll tell you, Jill, you hit on some of those key traits that when we talk to successful leaders, they speak to. And it's the just say yes, it's figure it out as you go, looking for that next opportunity, even if you're not quite thinking you're ready for it, and building that network before you need it. But the most important thing is having that continual curiosity to learn more and to do different things. So kudos to you, and which has led to you to having a very successful career. I also know that, because I have, spies on the side, that you are a builder of companies and teams. Tell me, what excites you about building a company?
Yeah, I mean, I know it may sound like an overly used sentiment, but I would say, follow your passion. I have a passion for building healthcare companies because it's how we get medicine to the patients that need them. And at Passage Bio, we're developing, of course, genetic medicines for extremely devastating and rare CNS conditions. And so for me, if you think about how you do that, how do you get there? You certainly need a team with technical expertise, but you also really need the right culture in order to be successful in executing on your mission. And so, that technical subject matter expertise it's the what, but equally important to me is the culture or the how you're doing it. So when I'm looking to build out a successful team, I not only look for the best and the brightest who have, the right technical expertise, but I also look for people who have the right attributes to thrive and grow the culture and values of the company. And from the outset at Passage from day one, we've really held patients at the center of our values, and collaboration, thinking about a commitment to excellence, and a focus on diversity are also important areas where I've been focused.
I was going to ask you, so when you start to build out that culture, and you were employee number one, so you were really, really there at the start of it all.
I was.
Tell me about those early days, and how did you lay out what that culture was going to look like? How did you know what you wanted it to look like?
Yes, I mean, listen, I think for me, when I joined the company, the founders of the company have very similar values, right, around this importance of patients. And, Jim and Tashi and Steve have focused on that in a variety of different ways throughout their own respective careers. And so there was support from the founders at the very basic nature of the company to focus on patients. And then, as I started hiring, I really started focusing on the attributes of the people I was bringing in, so that core structure of initial employees would reflect the things that I felt was really important. And I've highlighted some of those, right? Collaboration, especially beyond the focus on patients, because we had quite a lot to achieve in early days and not a lot set up. So, when I joined the company, there was no infrastructure. I didn't even have an email address then. So, there was the backbone to build a company. We had our agreement with the University of Pennsylvania's gene therapy program, our initial Series A funding, and of course, access to the founders of the company. But I was stretched across all aspects of the company, from tactical to strategic, and I needed to very quickly establish the company's story in preparation for moving the company through our Series B financing towards an IPO. And so, part of that was, while I was mapping out the company value proposition, in addition to hiring people that would help support the culture and really take leadership in moving us towards our goal, I also needed to dig deep into genetic medicine. It was just a really exciting time in the field, with the approvals, 2017 of Luxturna, but in 2019 of Zolgensma, and it pointed to that potential for genetic medicines to really transform, again, the lives of patients with debilitating conditions. And so, the scientific basis and discovery engine for Passage Bio comes from UPenn, from the gene therapy program there, and I have just been incredibly fortunate to have Jim Wilson, right, the pioneer of gene therapy, and his incredibly knowledgeable team guiding me through the intricacies of the state of genetic medicine research, and sort of all of those pieces combined that have gotten us where we're headed.
Tell me about what excited you about the science. You could have gone anywhere with your talents. Why this area of focus?
Yeah, I was really excited because I saw, again, this kind of promise of what gene therapy could do to really devastating conditions. And I, being with Jim and starting to see that early, preclinical data, particularly for our first two programs for diseases in children, was, really struck a chord with me. And I am a parent of premature infants who face their own health difficulties, different than what these kids face. These kids face, death at a very young age. And so the idea that I could be a part of something that would get medicine to these kids and hopefully, change the lives of their families and their parents was very exciting to me. And, similar with our other programs, of course. I'm just pointing to those because I feel a personal connection to it.
Wonderful. And I want to go back a little bit. You were talking before about raising funds, especially that Series E, and being able to tell the company's compelling story to potential investors. What are some of those lessons that you learned along the way? Because, obviously, as a woman having to pitch a company, it's not that common. So for those women who are listening in, do you have any tips or advice that helped you be successful?
Yeah, for sure. There are not a lot of women. You remember the women because you don't see as many of them. I gained extensive experience in fundraising, in a flash. It it was a quick learning, and it's one thing I love about small biotech. We move quickly, and we're often building the plane while we're flying it. So you have a powerful motivator to get it right. I think I would point to two things in terms of advice and fundraising. One absolutely critical thing I've learned is that the story you tell when seeking funding must be authentic. You cannot expect investors to be motivated if you yourself aren't excited about your mission. You have to believe it, and you have to be excited about it. For me, Passage, has exciting science. We touched on that a moment ago, and we have a compelling business plan. So I've been well placed to share enthusiasm with potential investors. What I've also learned is that you need to understand your audience and be able to present information in a way that's accessible. You will come across, you'll come across people with a range of expertise when seeking funding. You'll find those that have very deep technical understanding to those who have a more broad understanding of the industry with less focus on a particular technology or therapeutic area. And so in order to be successful in raising money, you have to be able to span that range and speak to both types of people.
That's great advice. And I want to touch too on the fact that you took Passage Bio public in 2020, which is always an interesting experience, but I would imagine even more so in the middle of a pandemic. Talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, just thinking about that IPO makes me smile. It was such a great experience. It's something I'm just tremendously proud of. And taking a company public, as you noted, it's exhausting, but it's also exhilarating. And it's the culmination of tremendous efforts by just so many different people. And at the end of February 2020, we were at the end of the roadshow, and finishing that up, and the world was just beginning to understand how this new virus, what the impact would be of that, and get a glimpse of how drastically our world would change. We returned to an office on a Friday, which was the day after our pricing of our IPO, and the following Wednesday we closed our office. So it is actually, it's just actually incredible that we were able to achieve such a successful IPO in that environment. I mean, we ultimately raised $248 million, which was about 120 million or so over our initial financing goal. So, we got it done. But it was definitely interesting times,
Testament to you and the story you were able to tell and your passion behind the science. So kudos to you. Job well done. Wow.
Oh, thank you. Certainly it was a team effort, but it was a good work by our team for sure.
And then on that Thursday, how did you then manage? If you came back on Friday, shut down the office on Wednesday, how did you then continue through, the next 14 months? Are you still operating virtually?
We are still operating virtually. We have a soft opening of our new headquarters space that's opening up in July. So, we're getting ready to have some people in the office again. But, the next day we had to go and start figuring out how we were going to operate, right? So how are we going to communicate? What's the structure of communication going to be like? What platforms will we use? And how do we keep people feeling connected to the mission and the goals of the company when we were not all in the same place? And I think, so many companies have faced that, right? We're not alone in that, but I do think we've done a great job. We also had to figure out how to execute on a recruiting plan. We have about 30 people or so after the IPO, and we've hired almost 100 people since then. So virtually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and you had all that funding, so we had to use it somehow, right? We had to spend some of that cash. So, well, again, kudos to you. So now you're at about 130, 140 folks?
Yeah, we're somewhere around 130. I'm not sure of the exact number today, but we're in that neighborhood.
And that's quite a ramp up in the last year or so. That's amazing. You clearly are a role model to others, especially women, I would think, in this small biotech space. What does this mean to you? Do you feel a sense of responsibility to other women?
I absolutely do. Being a role model, it's an honor. I've really benefited from the generosity of so many people throughout my career. I still benefit from so many people in my career. And it's important to me, having reached a certain level of success, that I'm as generous with my time and expertise. I seek opportunities to pay it forward and, support those that are earlier in their career, share experiences where I can to advance the industry. And one way I do that is by serving on the advisory board of Life Science Cares Philadelphia, which is a group that leverages the power of the life sciences industry to solve one of society's most complex problems, which is poverty. And so an example of a project that's targeting that problem that I'm involved in is called Project On-Ramp. Through that project, Passage, as well as other Philadelphia life science companies, take first-generation college students as interns. So by providing access to our company, we show these students possible career paths that they may not otherwise be aware of, and also allow them to begin to create their own networks. And, like we just touched on earlier, right, those networks and relationships, they are critical. And that way they can leverage those networks as they start their own career journeys.
That's fabulous. And tell me again the name of the group in Philadelphia. It's Life Science Carousel?
Life Science Cares Philadelphia. It started in Boston. There's a Life Science Cares in Boston, and now they have one in Philadelphia as well. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And I love that project, Ramp Up. That's fantastic. What a way to illuminate a path for those who may not have even seen the light yet. So that's fantastic. So as we're talking about your ascension into the C-suite, what advice do you have for other women who aspire to climb that ladder as well? What are some of the things you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think it's important to just keep going. It's not a great answer, but besides, I've focused on saying yes and building the network, I think, which are two critical things to build the right network and have the right skill set. But I also think it's just continuing to move forward. And what I mean by that is that I think we have a plan. A lot of us have plans, right? and you have your plans, and that plan doesn't necessarily work out the way that you want to, right? And I think having grit and just kind of continuing to move ahead, as Dory in Finding Nemo said, just keep swimming. I think it's really good advice. You just keep going, because new opportunities will arrive, and you can embrace them. And the path, you can wind up in a place through a path that you never expected, and that certainly happened here for me.
That's fantastic. Again, as you've gone through your travels, who do you look to for inspiration as somebody who inspires others? I'm always curious.
Well, I think for my own personal inspiration, I would point to my mom. As a child, I saw my mom, who was a single mom, have a business fail and put herself through school while lacking financial resources, and then later on tackling layoffs and a health crisis. And she's the one, we were just talking about. She's the one that taught me that your plan A can turn into a plan B, can turn into a plan C, that you just need to keep going. She's displayed tremendous grit throughout her life, and she's never ever limited the way that I think about what I can pursue or achieve. So that's my personal, inspiration, which is a little bit different, I think, than what you asked.
No, that's wonderful. She's a true Dory. She keeps swimming and swimming and swimming. That's amazing.
She does. She is an incredible human being. I'm very fortunate to have her as a role model in my life.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. I like to ask this question too, because when we get to a certain point in our lives, we look back and we say, oh my goodness, I wish I had known that then, right? What's the one thing you would tell yourself, your younger self, something you know now that you wish you knew back then?
I spent a lot of time worrying about the future and very caught up in worry. And I think what I would tell my younger self is to really trust that everything you go through creates the person you become, and that, that person has a path. And again, it's about grit and moving ahead. I know it's a continual theme here that I keep going back to, but I think, when I think about the worry and the times things didn't go in the direction that I had hoped that they would go, the grit and continuing to move ahead, being flexible, embracing change. I wish I had spent a lot less time worrying and just going through the journey with a little more ease.
It makes perfect sense. I get that. If we only had blinkers if we only looked in the rearview mirror, it would be so much easier. But that's why we have eyes in front of our head, right?
That's right.
Because this is our WOW podcast program, I'd like to end by asking you if you would tell me about an accomplishment or something that changed your career trajectory, left a lasting impression on you, that wow moment, if you will.
Yeah, I certainly have one of those. I joined Nutrinia as general counsel and chief administrative officer, and I was only there about 5 weeks when I was asked to step up and be the acting CEO. I said yes, going on theme. But it was,
yes.
Yeah, as I will. But it was really unexpected, and I faced many challenges in that role. But that experience and saying yes to those challenges and sorting through that set me on a completely different career path, armed with an even more expansive network of industry experts and a deeper self-confidence in my own abilities. And it was definitely a wow moment for me. I think about it frequently.
Oh, I think it's a wow moment for anybody to step into that role and really not expecting it and then to flourish in it. So wow to you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Jill, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your personal story as well as your professional story. And I'll tell you, some of those tidbits in there just resonate. Say yes. I think that is one of my themes too. Just say yes, because what's the worst thing that could happen, right? And to be resilient and have the grit, but you do it with grace and style. So I think those are key as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being part of our WOW podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast. And thanks to Senduit for making this episode possible. For more information, visit senduit.com. And don't forget to check out our other WOW episodes at pharmavoice.com/wow. This 2021 program is copyrighted by PharmaLinks LLC.